And hold on a minute. And we're going to talk a different subject tonight, and it's one of growing importance to Davidson as well as BRAC in Bangladesh. A number of the people on the call, class of 68, I'm glad some other folks could be with us. I retired about 10 years ago, been working with several national, international nonprofits for a few years. And so why the focus on Davidson and Bangladesh? My wife and I have supported BRAC for at least the last 5 years. But the main reason is two things. One, Bangladesh has been an amazing success story in terms of development, growing faster than India and Pakistan over the last 50 years. It has the world's eighth largest population, about half that of the United States, in an area the size of the state of Iowa. So very densely populated. BRAC, and Scott MacMillan will be talking about the story of BRAC in a minute, is the world's largest non-governmental organization and has been fundamental to the success of Bangladesh. So you'll be hearing from Scott and Dr. Naila Mamoon from the Davidson staff, and then we'll go to questions and answers to final 30 minutes of this. Let me give a quick introduction to Scott. He is BRAC USA's Director of Learning and Innovation. He was also the speechwriter for the founder of BRAC and published his biography called Hope Over Fate. This both doubles as a history of BRAC, and Davidson had an amazing offer event about 3-4 months ago with 40 students, Scott, Dr. Mamoon, and several members of the staff, as well as the class of 68. And so he will talk about both BRAC and the founder of BRAC in its role in developing Bangladesh. Meanwhile, Davidson is starting a partnership with BRAC University, and liberal arts is core to their model. And that's the connection point with Davidson. Its bedrock is liberal arts. And BRAC University has selected Davidson to partner with them to upgrade their liberal arts curriculum. Dr. Mamoon is Davidson's Director of Pre-Medicine and Allied Health, as well as Assistant Professor of Public Health. She earned her medical degree from Dhaka University in Bangladesh and received her PhD in pharmacology and toxicology from the University of Mississippi School of Medicine. And before I hand this over to Scott MacMillan from BRAC USA, please put up a short video which will describe BRAC and Bangladesh.
He's been called one of the unsung heroes of modern times. Fazle Hasan Abed was more than just a mild-mannered accountant. As a young man in the early 1970s, he had a corporate multinational job in finance. He could have stayed on that career path and led a very comfortable life. Instead, in 1972, confronted with war and natural disaster in his homeland, he quit his job and founded BRAC, originally the Bangladesh Rehabilitation Assistance Committee.
People died because they were poor. And I thought that the kind of life I was leading at the time, working for Shell Oil, I thought that this life is not really something that I'd like to pursue. I'd like to pursue something else.
In the decades to come, BRAC would become massive, reaching 100 million people in Asia and Africa. It is known as one of the world's most effective anti-poverty efforts. Abed avoided the limelight. He preferred to let his work speak for itself. Microfinance, community healthcare, education, humanitarian aid, and more. What links these diverse programs together is Abed's lifelong conviction that hope itself can help people overcome poverty. He saw that poverty was not just a lack of money or skills. People remained trapped in poverty, in part because they thought things could never change. They thought it was their fate to be poor. So Abed started by changing this mindset. He gathered people in small groups to talk about their problems so that together they could confront the injustices that held them back. They began to understand that a better world was possible, and that they themselves had the power to build it. This is the power of hope. Millions of people planning for the future, saving and investing, girls filling up classrooms, women starting their own businesses. BRAC is known for its entrepreneurial approach to tackling poverty. It is known for being efficient and effective, but it is far more than that. The legacy of Sir Fazle Hasan Abed is the triumph of hope over fate.
Human life is for a short period on earth, and I would like that short period that each of us have to be as happy and as productive and as meaningful as possible.
Thank you very much, George. Thank you for the introduction. Thank you, Davidson, for hosting this online event. It was a real pleasure to be on campus. Was it really 3 or 4 months ago? Earlier this year, and I'm really happy to see this collaboration starting to take shape. So let me introduce myself. My name is Scott MacMillan. In 2011. I was a freelance journalist, and I was traveling in Africa. Making my way as a freelance journalist in this long overland journey through Africa, doing some travel writing, and I got the development bug. I caught the development bug. Now, what I mean by that is the development bug. I just mean a curiosity about what works and what doesn't work in international development and poverty alleviation efforts. And I learned about the work that BRAC had started doing in Africa. Now, BRAC is an organization that very much flies below the radar. If you've never heard of BRAC until this meeting, I had never heard of BRAC until somebody told me about the work that they were doing and a job opening that had come up in New York City in 2011. And my reaction at that time was the reaction, I went and I looked up what BRAC was and what it was doing. And my reaction was very much the same as a lot of people have when they first hear about this organization and the scale and the breadth and the sheer size and scope of the work that it's doing. My reaction was how come nobody ever told me about this before, right? Kind of the world's best kept secret in some respect. So I started working for BRAC in 2011, and in the years to come, I began working very closely with the founder of BRAC, who is this man. He passed away in 2019. His name was Sir Fazle Hasan Abed, and I became his speechwriter. I worked with him on, when he gave a commencement speech for an honorary degree that he received, or I worked with him very closely on the World Food Prize acceptance. He won the World Food Prize in Iowa. Prestigious things like that. And I spent a lot of time sitting with him in his office in Dhaka, the capital of Bangladesh, in various hotel rooms around the world, listening to him tell stories from the previous 8 decades of his life. And at a certain point, it occurred to me, like, this is an amazing story and somebody should tell it. A few other things I noticed about Abed when I, as I worked with him. He wouldn't mind me saying this right now, but he was remarkably bad at marketing himself. He was not a self-promoter at all. And that's a bit unusual. That goes against the conventional wisdom. One would think, as the leader of a very large nonprofit, you would have to be out there telling your story, selling yourself, promoting yourself. He didn't really believe in that. He really believed in the value of keeping your head down and focusing on the work and letting the work speak for itself. I also noticed he had a way of telling the BRAC story that was quite a sprawl. I mean, there was a lot there. And if you're an American and you're into the idea of, what's your elevator pitch, right? You're selling a business concept. What's your elevator pitch? You only have a few minutes to keep somebody's attention. BRAC was, it was difficult to talk about it, on an elevator ride. Millions of clients of its microfinance program, for instance. BRAC was, in fact, is one of the world's largest providers of microloans, but it is not a microfinance institution as such because it does so many other things as well. Some of the things that were mentioned in the video. Tens of thousands of community health workers delivering essential health goods and commodities to people's doorsteps in very remote, rural, and low-income areas. BRAC ran its own schools, 1 million students in its own schools at any given time. By some measures, it was the world's largest non-secular and secular, non-religious, and non-governmental education system in the world. BRAC also had a university, which we're going to talk about a little bit later. Social enterprises. A lot of BRAC's income was generated not exclusively from philanthropic donations, which is a huge source of support to this day, but it also generates some of its own revenue from its own activities, including the interest payments on microloans and including a dairy, which serves very poor people while also serving packaging milk and yogurt and selling these in the cities. Seed company, a textile company. If you're aiming to catch somebody's attention with an elevator pitch, the elevator has gone to the top of the building and down back again. You've missed your opportunity. And yet, I also know it took me a while to figure this out, but I noticed there was a sort of underlying unity to everything that BRAC was doing. It wasn't this sort of hodgepodge of different interventions. There was a real underlying unity to everything that Abed had been doing, going all the way back to the foundation of BRAC, which originally stood for Bangladesh Rehabilitation Assistance Committee back in 1972. And this underlying unity was this idea that hope itself, the knowledge that the future could be better, not just the knowledge that the future might be better, but that there's something that people can do, something that you can do with your own hands, with your own creative actions to bring about a better future, hope and agency, that this knowledge in and of itself had the potential to help people break the poverty trap. Now, so I'm going to tell a few stories right now, just to try to bring this to light. In the spirit of a man who did not like to tell stories, especially about himself, I don't, even though this is a biography, I don't actually begin with an anecdote about Abed. I begin with an anecdote about a woman named Shohida Begum. Shohida Begum lives in the far north of Bangladesh. There's a map of Bangladesh. You can see this panhandle that sticks up into India. And this is where the mighty Brahmaputra River flows into Bangladesh from India. Although it's several hundred miles before it reaches the Bay of Bengal, The Brahmaputra River is 8 miles wide at this point in the far north of Bangladesh. Shohida Begum lives on a tributary of the Brahmaputra, of which there are thousands of tributaries and distributaries all over the nation of Bangladesh. It's sort of these mighty rivers making their last few hundred miles to the sea is really what defines Bangladesh and the deltaic floodplain of Bangladesh. The soil is exceptionally fertile, but life is also exceptionally uncertain, as it is for Shohida. She tells me her story. I meet her outside her dwelling, which is, you can't see the room that I'm in right now, but I'm in my very small home office. It's about the size of a pickup truck. It's a very, very small mud brick dwelling. And she tells me her life story in broad strokes. She was married off at the age of 11, which was not uncommon at the time. And child marriage is still quite common in Bangladesh. Unlike a lot of other young girls that face in situations of child marriage, she actually describes her relationship with her husband as one that was filled with love. She says, we were very poor, but there was a lot of love. Their only source of income was weaving together, he would take dried palm fronds and reeds, and he would weave them together to make these conical shaped hats. And he would sell these in the marketplace so farmers could protect their face from the sun working in the fields. And he would sell each for the equivalent of a few pennies, and that was their sole source of income. She describes to me one exceptionally hot summer day in July 2001. Her husband came back from the marketplace and was gasping for air, collapsed in front of their dwelling and died quite unexpectedly. It could have been heat stroke. It could have been any number of underlying medical conditions that, basic care, had it been available and affordable, would have taken care of. But as things were, Shohida Begum was left destitute. And I mean, days without food, begging for scraps of food, barely able to afford anything, wearing scraps. And she describes this sort of pit of despair that she had sort of found herself in, no way out. She describes to me going to the local brickyard, and working there, back-breaking work. This was, the work was essentially carrying mud on a pail on your head to the kiln where they baked bricks, and then back again. And you got paid according to the number of pails of mud that you carried. And the most she ever made in a single day, she told me, was the equivalent of 50 US cents. And most days she made half that. Backbreaking work. Then she told me the story of how the folks from BRAC came to town. No, I'm not going to tell you the story about the intervention itself, the program that she was brought into. I don't want it to be like a BRAC saves the day type of story. Although, suffice to say that Shohida Begum participated in the very first pilot of what became known as the graduation program, or the graduation approach to extreme poverty, which turned out to be one of the most cost-effective ways of ending the poverty trap. It was invented by BRAC, and she was in the first cohort of participants. The program itself had a number of different interventions, a number of different elements, and it was all designed to give somebody a big boost out of poverty so that they could be on a sustainable track to development. But among those elements was a gift of goats. So she received 3 goats from BRAC. 3 goats became 12 goats because goats multiply. And she loved her goats. I forgot to mention that she and her husband, up until now, had remained childless. So when Shohida Begum got these 12 goats, it was the first thing akin to motherhood that she had really felt. And she named the goats. She could recite their names. I met her in 2015 for the first time, and she could still recite their names. And they came when called. They were so well behaved. They slept in her bed. They never pooped or peed inside. They did all their business outside. And she loved the goats so much. And then one day, the fox came to town. And the name of the chapter is "The Fox That Killed My Goat." So there's your, you know what happens to the goat. And when the fox killed Shohida Begum's goat, it was as though her own child had been murdered. She was inconsolable. She said to me, "I don't know where the tears came from." She kept crying and crying and crying and crying. And eventually one of the BRAC caseworkers had to pull her aside and say, "Okay, look, you had 3 goats, then you had 12 goats, now you have 11 goats. We're going to get through this, okay? Yes, a goat was killed by a fox." She said, "You don't understand. It wasn't just a goat. It was my goat." She had an incredible sense of humor talking about it years later. Now, I thought to myself, the woman that I see in front of me right now is so filled with confidence. She speaks with the confidence of somebody who has overcome great odds. And yet she's describing somebody from not that long ago, maybe 15 years ago, who is utterly devoid of hope and confidence. Where does this confidence come from? And it occurs to me, the confidence is a little bit deceptive. Rising out of poverty as she has done, and she has several acres of land now. She's doing quite well for herself, all things considered. Rising out of poverty must be like walking on the sharp edge of a knife, where any setback, the rains don't come on time, a failed harvest, or a single dead goat feels like it's the end of the world. The other thing that occurs to me is, I think logic and common sense might say, well, yes, she's confident now. She's confident because she's risen out of poverty. And I've done a lot of reading and a lot of research on this topic. And the more I read about it, the more I learn. In many situations, the causality actually goes in the opposite direction. She rose out of poverty because she was confident. And she was confident because she had that BRAC caseworker there to say, look, we have a plan. We're going to get through this. Yes, there was a setback, but keep looking to the future. And there is hope. And that hope itself kind of was the fuel that fueled the rise from poverty. That's the story that I try to explore through many different stories from Abed's life. And I also think it's this idea that hope itself has a power to lift people from poverty. Really, it was the central driving conviction of Abed's life, and going all the way back to the 1970s. So I'm going to tell one more quick story to try to bring that to light. The year is 1974. Abed has already been working for a couple of years now in another remote area of Bangladesh. He's seen several major setbacks. Some programs have failed, as they often do. But he's begun working with a new way of teaching people basic skills like reading and writing. And this method is based on the methods of, it's a Bangladeshi adaptation of the methods of a Brazilian educator by the name of Paulo Freire. The Freirean technique is based on dialogue and discussion. You can teach people to read and write, but you have to make it a dialogue based. And the program that Abed came up with went something like this. You just focus on one word a day. The first word, so imagine people are gathered in a common area in the village, usually sitting in the dirt in a common area in the village. and there'd be a poster. And on this poster would be one word, and the word was home or house, Bari, B-A-R-I in the Bongo language. And because people are illiterate, there's a simple sketch of a dwelling as well. And the teacher would say, what is this? Well, what is the home really? What does this word really represent? And people would say, well, you know, it doesn't just mean it's not just a house, it's a home. It's not just the dwelling, it's also the area around the dwelling. It also means my family, my livestock, if I'm lucky enough to have any livestock. Are all homes the same? No, some are bigger than others. People would say, my home has a hole in the thatch in the roof, and it just during the monsoon it rains right onto my bed at night. Well, why don't you fix that? Because I don't have money. Why don't you have money? Because I'm poor. What exactly makes you poor? It's my wages. My wages are so low. Who sets your wages? These discussions get quite animated, and people begin to scratch at the surface of the nature of poverty itself. Okay, that's the first day. The second day, the word is tiger. There's a picture of a tiger, and the word is written. And the teacher, who's really acting more like a facilitator, right, a discussion facilitator, says, oh, the tiger, what does the tiger represent? And people would say, well, it's like strength, it's fierceness, it's the wildness of nature, it's danger. If you see a tiger in the wild, and every Bengali person knows what a tiger is, even if they haven't seen one in the zoo or in the jungle. If you see one in the wild, you know, go back to your house, go back to your home. And so the teacher would then ask a question, which was crucial. Can a tiger build a house? Right? And people would say, no, of course a tiger can't build a house. If it rains, the tiger can just run. The only thing the tiger can do is run under a tree. Can you build a house? And the people would talk amongst themselves, and they said, we can all build houses for ourselves if we have the tools and the materials, yes, and maybe a little bit of know-how, yes. And then the teacher / facilitator would say something like this. So the tiger is different from the human being in that the tiger can only adapt himself to nature, whereas the human being can adapt nature to suit his or her own needs. And this process of adapting nature to suit our own needs is the process of civilization itself. Whether we realize it or not, we all participate in some way. Now, can anybody in the group talk about a few creative things that they've done lately in that regard, some building things that have contributed to this process of civilization? And people would say, well, actually, in fact, you know, I harvested some rice the other day. I planted some seeds. I finally fixed the thatch on my roof so it no longer rains onto my bed at night. Or I repaired a flood wall to direct the flow of rainwater to irrigate the fields properly. And slowly the point would start to become clear, which is that society was theirs to own and to shape. It was not something given to them. And poverty itself had been made by humans, and it could be unmade by them too, through actions large and small, and they all had a chance to participate in that process. And the way Abed described it, he said, you know, it was as though a light went on, and it was a transformational thing for the people. The road ahead, to be sure, would be very, very long from there, because it wasn't enough just to talk, just to give people a pep talk about tigers and houses and poverty. It would involve the provision of services that people had been denied for so long. And that's where BRAC really went to scale, providing microcredit, education, loans, skills training, and so on, and now a university. But none of that would mean a thing if people did not first believe in the possibility of change. And I remember Abed telling me that story, can a tiger build a house? And I remember thinking, that was my aha moment, because I remember thinking to myself, somebody should write a book about that. And so here we are. I ended up that. I did not know that would end up being me, but the book is called Hope Over Fate, Fazle Hasan Abed and the Science of Ending Global Poverty. And I will stop right there and pass the microphone to Naila Mamoon, Professor Mamoon.
Thank you, Scott. Well, hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. And before I get started, so I would like to welcome you and send you my greetings from Watson Building in Davidson College. And I would also like to thank the Office of Alumni and Family Engagement for providing this, putting together this opportunity for us to share some of our ideas with you, and George for being the impetus behind all this, and really for being such a supportive presence. His enthusiasm has certainly energized us. So thank you, George. And Scott and Jenna from BRAC USA, thank you. I have really enjoyed collaborating with you thus far, and I'm really looking excited about the future. So I am going to share my screen so that I do have a very short set of PowerPoint slides, and I'm going to share my screen so you are able to follow along with me. Okay, so are you able to see my screen? Yes, okay, excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Scott. So the goal of our partnership, the overarching goal, is really to create opportunities for community engaged learning and cross-cultural exchange between the faculty and students of the two institutions, BRAC University and Davidson College. So BRAC University, you will see from, I pulled this from their mission statement. Their mission is to foster knowledge creation, uphold human values, and promote sustainable development. And our mission statement, our primary purpose at Davidson is to assist students in developing humane instincts and disciplined and creative minds for lives of leadership and service. So it's very, our missions are very well aligned. So it seemed so BRAC University, I felt, is a natural partner for us. So BRAC as an NGO, as you learned from Scott, every Bangladeshi is really proud of the work that BRAC has done in alleviating extreme poverty. And I am certainly one of them. And they have made significant improvements and are very committed to quite a number of projects, such as, definitely one is poverty alleviation, and they've done much work on this front. They're also quite active in providing access to healthcare for all. They're interested in early childhood education. They're working in humanitarian crisis management, gender equality, climate change, urban development, just to name a few. And Davidson students and alumni are well known for their commitment to issues of social justice, and have had and continue to have disproportionate impact for good. So we felt that, partnering with BRAC University is able to tap into all these different projects in an effort, to help their students develop as creative leaders. And we felt, it would be wonderful for our students and faculty to be engaged with some of these programs and learn from the Global South. So, the more specific partner objectives is really, develop courses. So BRAC University would like to develop courses that would either, develop new courses or redesign existing courses for their Gen Ed curriculum, particularly the STEM for Society stream. And they would like to redesign these courses or develop new courses that incorporate liberal arts concepts and pedagogical techniques, because again, liberal arts is very core to the way they would like to train their students. Some of the liberal arts principles. They're also, another emphasis area for BRAC University is really community engaged learning. Again, both are very much, two objectives or goals that Davidson has for our students. So for this partnership, our goal is to develop study abroad courses which employ experiential learning opportunities embedded in the living laboratory of Bangladesh as a means to learn from the global South. So what we are proposing is that, so we have the pilot that we have envisioned. Here is the timeline for that. So in the summer of 2023, we would work on a proposal for funding from the Dean Rusk International Studies Program at Davidson and recruit faculty. The conversation regarding both of these steps we have already begun. Fall 2023, we would set up a virtual introductory meeting between BRAC University and Davidson College faculty. Winter 2023, we hope to take 5 Davidson College faculty members to Bangladesh for a 2-day workshop with the BRAC University faculty. Everybody returns in the spring of 2024. We will hold 2 virtual workshops for syllabi development. And in the fall of 2024, BRAC University faculty and students will invite them to visit Davidson College for class observations, workshop for syllabi review, and develop collaborative community-based projects for our students. In winter 2024, we hope that the STEM for Society courses will be offered at BRAC University. And this is the time when we would offer the experiential learning component of the Davidson College course we develop in partnership with BRAC. So students, and we're envisioning this as a trip for 8 students whom we will take to Bangladesh. And we are also hoping that this course is going to be interdisciplinary. So we are hoping that we will have students who are interested in multiple different things, and we can draw students from multiple majors as well. So in the spring of 2025, we assess the program and communicate findings to stakeholders on the college's website. And well, if we are successful, and this seems there is, we're hoping, we are very hopeful that this will be a very successful program, and that students will be very interested in taking these courses. So we will hopefully then continue to offer this class every winter. And the class will be offered really in the spring semesters, and the experiential learning component will take place the winter before that. So that is so far our plan. And here are some sample Davidson College STEM courses that we feel would work well to repurpose for BRAC University's Gen Ed courses. One is Biology for Life, Biology of COVID-19, excuse me, Sociobiology of Health and Illness, Genes, Environment, and Health, Music, Sound with Impact. This is a physics class that's really meant for non-physics majors. Environmental Health Disparities. This is an environmental health class, again, meant for non-majors and majors. Chemistry of Art is a chemistry class that's meant for, again, non-majors. Data Science and Society is a course that the math department offers for non-majors. Biology for Life, Biology of COVID-19, Sociobiology of Health and Illness, Genes, Environment, and Health are 4 courses that are biology courses, but incorporate the social determinants of health in an effort for our students to understand that health and illness are not just matters of biology, but rather how we structure our society has a lot to do with our experience of health and illness. So we felt that these courses would serve well. Of course, we wouldn't work on use all of these courses, but really, so the initial plan is to take 2 of these. and then develop them for, work with BRAC faculty to develop them for their STEM in Society stream. And we would take the same 2 courses and incorporate experiential learning opportunities for our students, Davidson students. Thank you for your interest and support. George, I think.
Thank
may
you,
I pass
Dr.
it on to
Mamoon.
you?
And if we can go back to the share screen. And Sarah, I think if people have questions or they want to explore things, the raising hands would probably work best. So from the group, what questions do you have for Scott MacMillan and Dr. Mamoon? What more do you want to know about Davidson and BRAC?
Mario?
Go ahead.
Hi, Mario.
Hi. Thanks so much for your presentation, Scott. That it was really interesting, and Naila as well, Dr. Mamoon. That was fantastic. I'm curious, is Davidson the only partner for BRAC University, and how does this sort of intersect with other social issues in Bangladesh, such as gender inequality and lack of access to education in general? And this is sort of a more college university level. How does this sort of interact with that?
Well, I can tackle the first part of the question. BRAC University, I had hoped to have a representative of faculty representative of BRAC University on the line right now, but it's like 6 a.m. No, Davidson is not the only partner, but it's probably the partnership that is advanced, that has been the most fruitful that I'm aware of. And that's for reasons that are both serendipitous and also due to strategic alignment. The serendipity is, well, Naila, you can talk about the serendipity. But I just feel like, when I listen to Dr. Samia Haq, who's the dean of the faculty, the dean of general education, who's kind of Dr. Mamoon's counterpart at BRAC University. When I hear her talk about the importance of the liberal arts approach, I hear echoes of what Abed said to me many, many times, which is the liberal arts approach is really about, it's a way of bringing a sort of well-roundedness into the advancement of society. So to solve these like really intractable problems like healthcare, education, early childhood development, the route to that, yes, you can do these big anti-poverty programs, but for large-scale societal change, for the government to actually, be in a position where it begins offering more enlightened policies, more egalitarian policies, that's a higher education issue. The BRAC University was really the capstone of Abed's life's work in some respect, because he saw it as the thing that would last the longest. I mean, he often pointed out that historically universities have the greatest longevity among all institutions, corporations, governments, everywhere. It's the universities that last, right? It's Oxford that has been around since for centuries. And BRAC itself might be around in 100 years, it might not, but BRAC University will. So that's how I would answer the question. Dr. Mamoon?
Yes, well, Maria, to answer your question, BRAC University already offers a number of courses through their Gen Ed program, through the School of General Education. And some of those courses, the students are work on projects where they are they're working on some of the BRAC NGOs projects, right? So there is they tap into many of the ongoing projects that BRAC has. So, but the issue, I mean, the reason that we began to talk about a STEM in society stream of courses is because, unfortunately in Bangladesh and in, much of Asia, science education really relies on rote memorization. So, and this is something that I have, I did much of my schooling in Bangladesh. And I remember that it took me a long time, or rather, the applications, how I could apply my knowledge is in what I was learning in high school, in college. We really, we tried to figure it out on our own. It wasn't a part of the curriculum. It wasn't part of the learning objectives. So Dr. Huck and I started talking, we're talking about, how can we have the STEM students really think more about, use some of these liberal arts techniques and principles use or those learning objectives in their courses. And which is why Samia was very interested, Dr. Huck was very interested in developing the science STEM in society stream of courses, really. And, and this is something that we already do at Davidson. Almost all our STEM courses incorporate a number of community-based learning, incorporate a number of community-based learning projects. We also are very interested in, and we do discuss in almost all courses, STEM courses, how the knowledge really, how we can apply it to really the, to do good in society, do good in the world. So we figured that's how this this entire conversation came about. So do they have courses? Are they teaching courses with community engaged learning? Yes, but not any of the STEM courses don't have the community engaged experiential learning component.
Thank you. Another question.
I have a question.
And please introduce.
Yes.
So our speakers know who's talking.
Okay. I am Laura McGee. I'm class of 86 from Davidson in German. I think I'm one of the people who took biology for life and was just really grateful that Davidson offered that kind of thing because it was very applied. I really appreciated the comments from Naila Mamoon about shifting pedagogies. As somebody who worked in higher ed for most of my career and ran a department, world language pedagogy is something that has, in many countries, it's just rote memorization. And in the United States, we see ways to do that better. So that sounds like an awesome opportunity to assist BRAC in seeing different ways to do some of that. I just wanted to ask our speakers if there are any ideas for engaging alumni in some of this work. Any discussion of that so far?
Well, it is still in its infancy, some of the conversations, but absolutely, we would love for alumni to be engaged. Mm-hmm. Absolutely, because some of the study abroad courses that we do offer, particularly in the health sciences, or that many of the pre-health students take, alumni are involved. So they'll travel with us to Zambia and for 3 weeks. So yes, absolutely, it's something we welcome.
Thank you.
We would love to have you on board. Absolutely.
Thanks.
Another question, and please introduce yourself.
I'll just chime in and say something else if let other people have a moment to think. My partner is currently serving in the Peace Corps response program in Botswana. And it's very interesting to see how Peace Corps response is structured. It really starts with a call from another country. They have a very specific need. and they propose a project and would like to have a consultant come for up to 42 days. And that is, so my partner is an economic development specialist. And I just thought that was a neat model to engage professionals who have specific expertise for a shorter term engagement. Actually, Peace Corps response is 3 to 12 months. I'm sorry, I was confusing it with Fulbright specialist, and that's a shorter term one. So I'm just seeing different ways that people who are at a certain point in their lives where they are really good at something and yet they want to take the time to share that. It seems like there are some opportunities out there, and maybe you all will see something that you could do in that vein as well. Yeah.
I will say that BRAC has a robust visitors program, and if you, how do I say this? You know, if you want an eye-opening experience that could potentially change your view of life as you know it, you know, visiting the slums of Dhaka and seeing BRAC's programs there, seeing the maternity clinics, seeing some of the education programs, some of the early childhood development centers. It's an experience like no other. That's
Yeah.
all.
Yeah, I feel like I'd like to use that expression. I can only imagine, but I'm sure I cannot imagine. And that's exactly what you're saying. You have to go there and experience it. Yeah.
And I will say also, Abed was he was very keen for the process of economic and social development to be led by people from the global South, right? He really believed in indigenous development, but he was also, and he, you know, steadfastly, almost like steadfast openness to different points of view, bringing in people from the experts from here, there, and everywhere. You know, he read someplace that, you know, it was the New Zealanders who had the best mother language program in the world, and he went to Edmund Hillary, who was at that time the ambassador, not the high commissioner he was the high commissioner to India and Bangladesh, and requested a few language specialists to come set up the mother language teaching program. All sorts of stories like that are sprinkled throughout the whole BRAC story. So it really is you know, it's a story of like of openness to the world. So this idea of people contributing what they can, I think is quite compelling.
Yeah, neat. Yeah.
So, any additional questions for our panelists?
George, this is Dave Westfall, class of 68. Not a question, but just a thank you. I had no idea, and this has been very inspiring. So thank you for the program.
Thanks, David. Will I see you at the reunion?
I'm afraid that I already had a fishing trip in Canada scheduled that same time. A number of my fraternity brothers will be there, and they've already given me grief about fishing, but this was something that had been set up, you know, good ways in advance. So no, I will unfortunately not be there. I've been to our other key ones, but I won't make it to this one. So y'all have to behave without me.
Thanks, David. Let me ask one question. And BRAC is not just in Bangladesh, but in up to a dozen other countries. What unique advantages does BRAC have being from Bangladesh, working with, call it, middle development and developing countries in Africa and Asia?
16 actually now.
16?
16 countries, yeah, including well, for instance, the whole experience of going outside Bangladesh started in 2002 when the Taliban, the last Taliban regime, fell. And there were millions of refugees streaming back into the country, into Afghanistan. And conversations arose between some UN officials in Bangladesh and Abed, and they said to him, you have something to share with the world, right? You can't just sit here in Bangladesh. Abed already knew this. He already knew that eventually if he was really going to tackle the problem of poverty, he had to take a global perspective. To answer your question, I would say there's a certain point of view that is baked into the BRAC DNA, if you will, and it's in my mind something that that other NGOs that come from the global north don't necessarily have, or they maybe, I don't want to criticize anybody, but they maybe don't exercise it fully or as effectively as they might. And that is this idea that development is not a gift to be given. It is not something that like we rich people give to poor people. It doesn't work that way. If you approach it that way, it won't work. Development is not given, development is taken, right? In other words, people who are struggling with poverty themselves need to understand, need to sort of claim their rights, exercise their voices, and help and empower themselves as opposed to being empowered by somebody else, right? And that is true development. And that's sort of part of the BRAC approach, and it's sort of it's a thread that weaves itself throughout the many different programs that BRAC offers. But I think that it's something that BRAC is able to offer due to its experience growing up or rising up in the context of Bangladesh. It has a bit more credibility, I think, in taking those approaches to someplace like Uganda or Rwanda or Sierra Leone or Liberia. I don't know, Dr. Mamoon, do you have any thoughts on that?
No, not really. I mean, I think, BRAC has certainly done a wonderful job at all fronts. And, I said this before that I think, we're really very proud as a Bangladeshi of what BRAC has been able to accomplish, not just in Bangladesh, but really now out in the world as well. And, it's a wonderful success story.
And it's not just about taking programs that were successful in Bangladesh and replicating them elsewhere. Some of our most successful programs, I'm very active in a girls empowerment program in Uganda. That it was an adaptation of something that was tried in Bangladesh, but it didn't really take its form until it got to Africa. And it is a very, very effective and cost-effective way of empowering girls and young women through mentorship, through safe spaces, and through a club-based empowerment program. And we've had multiple randomized control trials showing extremely important results coming from that in terms of income gains, in terms of drop in teen pregnancy rates, all sorts of things. And that really is, it wasn't something that was just replicated from Bangladesh. It is adapted to the context, and in some cases, it really grows from the local context. That's important.
Thank you. I think we have time maybe for one final question or observation.
Yes. Yep, I actually have a question submitted. So the question is, how does BRAC balance the need for immediate relief and assistance with longer term development goals?
Oh, that's a good one. In the humanitarian context, and when we said the humanitarian context in the jargon of development, that usually means post-disaster response. The Rohingya crisis in eastern Bangladesh is a very, very good example. You have to start thinking about long-term development almost immediately, right? BRAC itself started as a refugee relief program, and in the minds of there were returning refugees from the Bangladesh War of Liberation, and Abed was a young accountant, and he thought, I want to do something to help my new country. And he got there, and he basically realized, relief is not going to cut it. Relief is not enough. Relief is never going to be enough. Long-term development, in terms of providing people with access to services that they've long been denied, such as credit, education, health care services, empowering them or helping them empower themselves to take control of their own lives. That's the real route, to ending this sort of perpetual cycle of emergencies or disasters that we often see. So yes, you do have to provide a sense of normalcy for people that have been through, whether it's man-made or natural disasters, especially for the children that are involved. You need to establish a sense of normalcy. That is why we invest in these early childhood education centers, these what we call them ECD, or early childhood development centers, to give children that have been traumatized a sense that life can be normal. We can play. It's okay to play, right? And on the you build on the bedrock of that sense of normalcy and begin to develop people's livelihoods, and think about ways that they can start their own businesses, micro-entrepreneurship, all of that. So I'm not sure if I've answered that question. There is a balance to be struck, but like first things first, there are obviously first certain needs that need to be met in a humanitarian context. But once you've met those needs, you really have to immediately begin looking towards long-term development.
Thank you. We've run a little bit over the hour. I want to thank everyone for participating. I want to particularly thank Scott and Dr. Mamoon for sharing their insights and the plan for the partnership between BRAC University and Davidson College. And I also want to thank Sarah and Anissa for arranging all this from the college staff perspective. So if you haven't read the book, it's available. And would encourage you to read it. And Scott, is there a means, how would you suggest people get a hold of the book?
Oh, by any which way, any which way you can. It's on Amazon, and that's the quickest way to get it.
Okay.
If you want to order directly from the publisher, you also can. There is a website that is escaping me right now that, some people don't like to buy from Amazon because it puts local booksellers out of business. I can circulate a link to a great online resource where you can buy books from a retailer, an online retailer that actually a portion of the proceeds go and support local booksellers. Best thing, go to your local bookstore and say, "Get me this book." They will order it for you.
Thank you. And again, thank everybody, and go Cats, and go Bangladesh, go BRAC.
Yes.
Thank you, George. I do have a quick, as you can see, this is work in progress. So I welcome your comments and your suggestions as we work on the specifics. Thank you so much. George, thank you.
It's Bookshop. It's bookshop.com, bookshop.org. And I will actually drop this into the chat right now. But,
Right.
Click on it because that might disappear as soon as this conversation is over. But you can also buy it on Amazon, and I won't be offended at all.
Okay.
Yes.
And you can get it probably tomorrow. Thank
Thanks,
you, everybody.
everybody.
Thank you, George.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
everyone.
Have a good night.
Right.
Bye-bye.